Jane Logie.
Chair, thank you. So to speak to the SOP and specifically around the provision to whether in the case of multiple births, in the case of children being born before 37 weeks gestation, or when a child is born with an impairment which would entitle a person to government-funded disability support service, which is the context of the SOP, and it is a reduction of the bill, which we've already sadly lost the vote in this House on, but it is to reduce it down rather than to all children, the 26 weeks, because that wasn't deemed by this House, tragically, to be deliverable for this country, despite the overwhelming number of submissions in favour of that. The member has brought this SOP to the House for a much reduced level of provision to meet the absolute most important need we have in our community, and that is in instances of premature birth, multiple births, and where there is a case of disability. So I would like to spend a little bit of time just actually focusing in on those families and what their needs are. And we did hear through the submission process of people who had multiple births and talked about their babies waking up at different times during the night. So when they tried to go back to work in that level at the 12 weeks point, they were going back to work without having had any sleep whatsoever, basically, because their babies weren't waking at the same time every night, so they were feeding basically the entire night. So there is a very real demonstrated need that we were informed about for the provision of paid parental leave in the cases of multiple births. And I think anyone in this House, if they put themselves in the shoes, if they haven't had twins or triplets, they imagine themselves in the shoes of that family trying to actually be a new parent with multiple children at once. I think most of us here would have some empathy to want to give them the time of at least 6 months to get to grips with that job for the benefit of their family, for the benefit of their babies. And we know that actually the health benefits of that to those babies is just unchallengeable, that they are lifetime benefits. And just to talk a little bit more too about the premature births, because approximately 10% of all babies are born premature in this country. That's over 5,000 babies a year are born premature. And the consequences of that, and we heard from somebody who presented to the Select Committee, which was, I think, brought all of us to tears, who, it was before the time of parental leave, who had had a premature birth and the baby had been in ICU and she was having to leave her baby to go to work. I'm not a parent, but that to me is just completely just gut-wrenching, the thought of giving birth to a child, this most special time in your life, and your baby's in ICU, that level of stress and anxiety you must have and fear that you would lose that baby, and then you have to go to work. It's a horrific thought. And then the consequences of it as well, which makes this SOP so important, is that even when the baby comes out, hopefully willing, and comes out well and healthy, then in effect the process starts. So whereas most women would have the access to parental leave from a full-term point, for these women they would have to take paid parental leave from a much earlier point, which actually means that the time around breastfeeding is much reduced and that time for bonding in the flesh is much reduced if you're constrained to the 14 or the 16 weeks. So this 26 weeks is absolutely critical. And if we think that is applying in about 10% of cases in New Zealand, then it's really hard to see, and I would like to hear from a government member to argue against that, of why you wouldn't want to provide that bare minimum of 26 weeks to families in the case of a premature birth. And I would also say in case of disability that clearly is also a point of very real need.
Chair.